Tom Bracken, Take 12, Teaching Quality Improvement, what the student nurse needs to know. So on Saturday, I did my presentation. I was unable to video because at the last minute I was told the school didn't allow it, and for good reason, privacy issues, which is fine. So started my presentation off with a pre-lecture assessment. This was to use for with the follow-up post-lecture assessment, just to find out if my teaching was effective or not. So, um, all throughout this process, I, had a high level of anxiety, and what was on the top of my mind was keeping the students engaged and try to get them involved and have it somewhat student centered, right? That's what we're all trying to do. Okay, so I started off lecturing about, the need for quality improvement and how it all starts in nursing school or should start in nursing school, with some facts. And then I went into, let's talk, um, and I wanted to find out what the students knew already about quality improvement. So it was a little bit of an assessment so I can know how to direct my teaching. Um, and it was also a way to get the students involved right off the bat also, so I didn't lose them. Uh, then went into the objectives for the day, and most of the objectives are related to the cognitive domain, and two of the objectives were related to the affective domain. I couldn't touch upon the psychomotor domain just because of the time constraints of this teaching module. Perhaps if this teaching module was to continue, I could incorporate psychomotor domain. So then I just went into talking, stressing the importance of data and how nursing um, care is reflected in patient outcomes and how there's accountability associated. I'm not going to get into depth too much here because my other videos were too long and I lost my feed. So I talked about data, talked about show, showed them how CLABSIs, CAUDIs, falls, pressure ulcers, patient satisfaction are all patient outcomes that are related to nursing care. When I talked about data, I tried to bring it all back to the patient, included the human factor, and how everything we do is related to the patient and patient outcomes. Also talked about about accountability. I think I stressed that over and over. Also talked about how nursing is going the way of magnet recognition, and magnet hospitals have better outcomes than their cohorts more than half the time. Also talked about the ANA scopes and standards of practice, how our competencies are based on that, and standard number 10 is quality of practice. Also have a whole slide on how nurses contribute to quality. You can see from my presentation, I just stressed everything on there. The thing I stressed the most was documentation because they had just finished their documentation labs last week. I talked about NDNQI, what it is, and probably the most important thing about NDNQI is probably that you can measure your unit against another unit from another hospital or from the average of hospitals of your unit type. And I went back and talked about nurse-sensitive indicators again, quality, CLABSI, pressure ulcers, falls, patient satisfaction. This time I'm labeling them as nurse-sensitive indicators as opposed to just data or patient outcomes. So I'm getting that term going in their mind. And I go on to further discuss three nurse-sensitive indicators that I know they know something about: pressure ulcers, falls, and quality. So we talked about interventions that nurses do to prevent these outcomes and why it's important to have good patient outcomes in these areas. Talked about never events and how third party payers, Centers for Medicare and Medicaid, JACO, everybody's holding nursing accountable for these never events. So like I said, we went over interventions, which was great for for student participation. So I had them really engaged in the conversation, and just hearing the discussion. One student would say one thing, and then the other one would feed off of that student. So it kind of was that student-centered learning, and they're also learning from each other, the social constructivist theory. So don't quote me on that. I just rattled that off the top of my head. Um, so then we went on to discuss. I asked them if they had any ideas for a quality improvement project that they can think of what they've seen in clinical. And nobody could come up with anything. So I mentioned, how about sequential compression device non-compliance? I had just seen it that morning in clinical and thought it might be a good idea. So we discussed the rationale for having them, and then we came up with ideas on a performance improvement project. What can we do in the hospital on the unit level to improve compliance? And we came up with a plan, which was nice to see develop. Also talked about a personal story about quality improvement, just to get in that personal factor, and kind of wrapped it up with, again, with the importance of knowing quality improvement and related, the current healthcare um, setting, how outcomes are very important, and they're going to be more important as time goes on. So I wasn't able to include everything in this brief video, but that kind of gives you a synopsis of what my presentation was like. Okay, thanks, and I look forward to hearing everybody else's. And um, I'm going to have a post in a couple of days about my evaluation process of my teaching project. Thank you.